The boardroom fell completely silent the instant the little girl, who had not willingly reached for another human being in nearly 4 years, slowly walked past a room filled with executives, security officers, therapists, and assistants to place her tiny hand into the rough, scarred hand of a maintenance worker carrying nothing more than a toolbox and a mop. Her mother, one of the youngest billionaire business leaders in the country, stopped breathing for a moment as tears filled her eyes. The child looked toward the quiet stranger with complete trust, gently touched his weathered face, and whispered the first words anyone had heard her direct toward another person since the accident that had changed both their lives forever. "She sounds nice." The room froze because the girl had not been speaking about herself or her mother. She was describing the kindness she somehow heard inside the man's heart. Before we continue this emotional journey, if you believe kindness can heal wounds that money never can, if you believe forgiveness creates miracles, and if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. By becoming part of our family and our community, you help stories of compassion reach people who may desperately need them. Vivian Ashcroft had spent 15 years building one of the world's most respected technology companies. Financial magazines celebrated her as fearless. Investors admired her discipline. Employees respected her impossible standards. Every decision she made was driven by logic, preparation, and measurable results. Yet every morning, when she entered the beautiful office that overlooked the city skyline, none of those achievements mattered because the only victory she wanted was one she could never purchase. Her 8-year-old daughter, Eloan, had once been the happiest child anyone had ever known. Curious, creative, endlessly affectionate, she filled every room with laughter. Then a devastating daytime highway collision stole her father and left her emotionally trapped behind walls no specialist had been able to break. She still understood the world. She could hear perfectly. She could speak. But fear convinced her silence was safer than connection. She rarely spoke. She refused eye contact with almost everyone. Even gentle touch made her withdraw. Vivian exhausted every possibility. She hired world-famous therapists, educational experts, child psychologists, behavioral specialists, and communication coaches. Every treatment brought tiny improvements before another emotional setback erased months of progress. The billionaire could solve billion-dollar business crises before lunch, but she could not convince her daughter that the world was safe again. Employees quietly learned never to discuss Eloan. It remained the invisible sadness hanging over every celebration inside the company headquarters. On the ground floor worked a recently hired maintenance employee named Graham Mercer. Most people assumed he was simply another hard-working janitor trying to rebuild his life after military service. Nobody realized he had spent over a decade as a Navy SEAL before quietly retiring following injuries sustained during a humanitarian rescue mission. He rarely mentioned his past because he believed service was never something meant to impress strangers. After leaving the military, he became the full-time father of his young son, Rowan, whose mother had passed away from illness several years earlier. Being a single father changed Graham more deeply than military combat ever had. Raising Rowan taught him patience beyond endurance. Every scraped knee, every frightened dream, every uncertain moment reminded him that strength was not measured by winning battles but by helping someone else feel safe enough to smile again. Each morning, before beginning his maintenance rounds, Graham left tiny wooden animal carvings on different office windowsills. He carved them during lunch breaks using leftover pieces of wood. Some employees found foxes. Others discovered birds or turtles. There were never notes attached. Only simple reminders that beauty could exist even in ordinary places. Nobody knew who created them. One sunny afternoon, Graham noticed Eloan sitting alone beside the indoor garden while waiting for her mother's meeting to finish. She stared silently at a butterfly resting on a flower beneath the glass ceiling. Instead of approaching her, Graham quietly repaired a loose bench several feet away. He never looked directly at the girl. He simply worked carefully, humming an old melody Rowan loved hearing during long car rides. Eloan did not move. The following afternoon, she appeared again. So did Graham. Again he repaired something nearby without expecting conversation. Days became weeks. The silent routine continued. sometimes he polished the wooden railings. Sometimes he watered plants. Sometimes he carved tiny animals while taking a break. Never once did he pressure the little girl to acknowledge him. Trust, Graham believed, could never be demanded. It could only be earned. One afternoon, Eloan quietly picked up one of the unfinished carvings after Graham accidentally left it beside the bench. Instead of taking it away, he simply smiled gently and continued tightening a loose bolt nearby. She examined the tiny unfinished rabbit for several minutes before carefully placing it back exactly where she had found it. The next day, the rabbit was complete, its tiny ears leaned slightly forward, almost as though it were listening. Eloan secretly smiled. Security cameras captured that smile. When Vivian watched the footage later that afternoon, she cried for the first time in months, determined to understand the mysterious maintenance worker. She requested Graham's employment file. What she discovered surprised her: decorated military service, multiple medals, letters praising extraordinary courage, recommendations describing exceptional leadership. No mention of any of it during his interview, only one sentence under personal goals. "I simply want honest work that allows me to be present for my son." Vivian could not understand why someone with those qualifications chose maintenance work. When she finally asked him during a routine inspection, Graham answered with complete sincerity: after years of protecting strangers around the world, he realized the most important mission remaining was raising one good man. Titles no longer mattered, time did. The answer stayed with Vivian long after their conversation ended. A week later, Rowan visited headquarters during his school's Community Appreciation Day. Unlike most children, Rowan treated everyone exactly the same: executives, receptionists, cleaners, gardeners, everyone received equal kindness. When Rowan noticed Eloan watching alone from across the atrium, he quietly sat several feet away and began drawing birds with colored pencils. He never invited her. He simply made space. Nearly 20 minutes passed before another small sheet of paper slid across the floor. It was Eloan's drawing. A butterfly. No words, just colors. Rowan smiled and continued drawing. Neither child spoke, neither needed to. Vivian watched from upstairs with tears streaming down her face. Months of expensive therapy had never achieved what simple patience had accomplished in less than an hour. As weeks continued passing beneath bright afternoon sunlight, Eloan slowly changed. She no longer hid whenever Graham appeared. She waited. Sometimes she carried one of his wooden animals around the building. Sometimes she watched him repair broken furniture. Sometimes she helped Rowan water plants. Tiny victories accumulated quietly. The company slowly noticed. Employees began treating one another differently. Managers thanked cleaners more often. Executives learned employees' names. People smiled more. Without intending to, Graham transformed the culture of the entire organization simply by treating every person with dignity. Then everything nearly fell apart. An investigative journalist published an article accusing Graham of hiding military actions from his past. The story exaggerated classified operations, twisting honorable service into suspicion. Social media exploded with rumors. Investors worried about negative publicity surrounding the company. Several board members demanded Graham's immediate dismissal. Vivian faced enormous pressure. Removing one maintenance worker would satisfy headlines. Keeping him might damage stock prices. For several painful hours she questioned her own judgment. Then she remembered watching her daughter smile. Money had never achieved that, kindness had. Vivian stood before the board and refused to dismiss Graham without facts. An official military review quickly confirmed every accusation was false. Former commanders publicly described Graham as one of the most honorable people they had ever served. Beside, public opinion shifted overnight. The company earned widespread respect for refusing to abandon an innocent employee. But something even greater happened. When reporters gathered outside headquarters hoping for dramatic photographs, Eloan quietly walked through the lobby, took Graham's hand, and calmly stood beside him. No fear. No hesitation. No hiding. That single image appeared across newspapers nationwide, not because of business, because courage looked different than people expected. It looked like a frightened child choosing trust. Months later, during the company's annual community celebration held entirely beneath the warm afternoon sun in the headquarters courtyard, employees volunteered together to build a free children's learning center funded jointly by the company and staff donations. Every department participated. Executives painted walls, engineers assembled bookshelves, receptionists planted flowers. Maintenance team supervised construction. Nobody cared about job titles anymore. Eloan wandered through the celebration, holding another tiny wooden carving Graham had made especially for her. A butterfly, its wings spread wide. Vivian approached Graham quietly. She thanked him for giving her daughter back a future. Graham gently shook his head. He explained that children already carry extraordinary courage inside themselves. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to wait patiently until they feel safe enough to reveal it. Vivian realized she had spent years trying to fix her daughter. Graham had simply accepted her exactly as she was. Acceptance succeeded where perfection failed. As the celebration continued, Eloan climbed onto the small stage where local children displayed artwork created during the event. Hundreds of employees watched quietly. Instead of hiding behind her mother, she stood confidently beneath the bright afternoon sky and held up a painting. It showed two butterflies flying above a wooden bench surrounded by flowers. In one corner stood a father holding his son's hand. Across from them stood a mother holding her daughter's hand. Between both families stretched a bridge made entirely of small acts of kindness. The audience applauded softly. Eloan looked toward Graham, then toward her mother. She smiled, not the fragile smile captured months earlier by security cameras. A real smile. A hopeful smile, the kind that changes everyone fortunate enough to witness it. Before the celebration ended, Vivian announced that every year the company would dedicate one full day to community service instead of corporate promotion because true success should always be measured by lives improved rather than profits earned. The loudest applause came not from investors or executives but from the employees who understood exactly why that promise mattered. Before we reach the end of this journey, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether you believe patience, quiet kindness, or forgiveness has ever changed someone's life, because your words may encourage another person who is struggling today. As the afternoon sun settled gently across the courtyard, Eloan slipped her